Hey, can you guys hear me fine?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. So today, guys, we are going to talk about triggers. And let me share my screen. Okay, guys. Okay. So first of all, what are triggers? So triggers is basically a piece of code which triggers is nothing but it doesn't get executed by explicitly calling it. Okay, so triggers will run on its own depending upon an event has happened in your database. When I say an event happened in your database, that means either you inserted a record or you updated a record, you deleted a record, or you undeleted a record. Okay, if you do any of these, then what happens is if you have a trigger, that trigger will run automatically. Okay, so there are two types of triggers. One is called as after triggers, and the other one is called as before triggers. Now, what is the difference between after trigger and before triggers? So let's say you have a account record and you inserted that record. Now, moment you click on the save button, it doesn't directly get committed to the database. It basically it goes through validation and it first it gets saved and then it gets committed. The transaction gets committed. So before you actually commit that into the database or insert the record, if you had a trigger on the account object and that trigger is for before trigger, then that trigger will automatically be invoked, right? So if you remember Apex classes, you have to explicitly invoke them, right? You will have it equals to new, you will create an object of the class, then you will invoke the method. Whereas triggers, you don't have to explicitly invoke them. Depending upon what event has happened, if you have a trigger associated with that, it will automatically get fired. Now, how do you declare a trigger? So the way to do is just like you use the keyword class to represent a class, you will have to use the trigger keyword. Then you have to provide the name of the trigger. Okay, that is the name. It could be any name you can use. Generally, it's just like class name, you can have trigger name. And then you have to specify the keyword on, and then you have to specify the object name. Okay, on which object the trigger is for. Is it for account object? Is it for a standard object, opportunities, lead, or a custom object? And then you will define the comma separated list of events on which this trigger will be automatically fired. Okay, and then you will have an opening brace and a closing brace. So this is how you declare a trigger. So first the keyword would be trigger, then it would be the name of the trigger, then you have to specify the trigger is for which object. Is it for account, lead, opportunity, or a custom object? And then you can have a comma separated, which means you can have a before insert trigger. You can basically have after insert. Then what will happen is when the record gets inserted, before the record gets inserted, this trigger will be fired. Once the record has been inserted, what you want to do, then also this trigger will be fired. So then you can have different events as well. And generally, you should only have one trigger per object. Okay, it's a good practice to have one trigger on per object, because when you have multiple triggers, then you might have some challenges figuring out which code is going to execute first. So it's always a good practice to create one trigger per object. Okay, and usually the code in the trigger will be a minimum code, you will have like a trigger framework, and then you will also have use handler classes. And the handler classes is the where the majority of the logic will go, and you will just call these handler classes through the triggers. Okay, so sometimes to keep things simple, I might write logic in the trigger and I might also create a separate handler class. But in the real world, you will see very minimum logic in the trigger, and you will have a handler classes on which you will basically the majority of the logic would be written in those handler classes. Any questions so far on trigger, guys?
Um, I have a question about the before insert and after insert. Can you elaborate what's the difference between those two when it
So,
comes to trigger?
okay, so basically what happens is, um, see, the before insert, so there is a order of execution, right? Not everything will execute all together. So first what will happen is a record gets loaded. Okay, then what will happen is validation will happen. Okay, then a before flow will get executed, then an before trigger will get executed, and the record gets saved. At this point, the record hasn't been committed to the database. Okay, it has just been available. It hasn't been committed to the database. And then you will have after triggers, after flow will be there. And then you will actually, the record gets committed to the database. So before the record gets committed to the database, if you want to execute certain things, okay, before the record is saved, then this is where your before triggers will be. And then once the record is saved, and before it gets committed, you will have after triggers. So it is depending upon at what point the record has been committed to the database. So there is a slight difference between saving to the database and just inserting it. So let me tell you the order here. So first, let's say the record is going to load, then the validation rules will kick in, then the before flow will get executed, then the trigger will get executed, then after flow will get executed, then, sorry, after trigger, then after flow, and then finally the commit. So here at this point, before the record is actually saved to the database, or sorry, committed to the database, before trigger will run the record before getting saved. And after trigger means once the record has been successfully saved, then the after trigger will run. Does it make does it make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. So when we talk about saving or being saved means it's saved in database or we are saving it's in the memory and it's commit. So my my confusion is about difference between saving and inserting in the database. Is that the same? Are those the same?
Like inserting to the database
And
is like
save.
inserting a new record. Saving
Mm-hmm.
means it could be related to save, updating the record as well. So you're asking the difference between the save and commit. Is that what it is?
Yes, save and insert or commit. Yeah.
See, save will happen during insert operation also and update operation also. Um, so think of save as request to save the record, okay?
Right.
And commit is where actually permanently writes data to the database.
Oh.
Okay, so saving is just user clicks on the save record, they're requesting to store the record.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
whereas the committing means the actual permanently that change has been committed to the database.
Makes sense. And commit and insert is the same, right?
See, insert means when you are creating a new record. That is what an insert means. That record doesn't exist. Okay. Commit will happen in the case of update also. It will happen in the case of insert also. Commit means you're permanently saving something to the database. Insert means when that record doesn't exist, and you are adding a new record into the database. That is what an insert means. Does it make sense? So after you insert the record, it will get committed to the database.
Gotcha. So if we want to talk about order of execution, save and insert happens at the same time, right?
See, insert, okay, you're getting confused with saving means you're just requesting the record to get saved into the database. Insert means that record was never there. You are inserting a brand new record. You're inserting a brand new record, and then the commit is going to happen, which will actually make the change fixed or written in the database. So insert is a operation which tells you that that record never existed before and it is a brand new record. But commit means that new record actually committed to the database. So after you could do an insert operation, you can do an update operation. Commit will happen in all these operations.
At the end. Gotcha. Okay.
At the end.
Okay. Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
Insert only means that the record is a brand new record.
So, Deepika, after trigger happens before commit?
So after trigger,
Isn't it after means like it's supposed to happen once a record has been inserted and like committed to the database? After that, it's supposed to happen?
so after trigger, usually, let me think about it. After trigger, because you can't, let me see here, I've written down. After trigger runs before the record is committed. Yes, so this is correct. So first what will happen is before trigger will run, then the after triggers will run. Any automation you have, workflows, those will run. And then finally the commit will happen, which basically will only happen if there are no errors. Okay, so does it make sense? So commit is the last thing when it will make sure, because if let's say an after trigger ran, okay, and during that after trigger an error happened, you want to roll back everything. So commit will happen always at the end.
So,
Okay, inside and after trigger, the record is not yet committed.
But inserted. Like there's a like after we before trigger happens, after that record will be inserted, and then after trigger, and then maybe committed.
Committed will be at the end.
Okay. Okay, got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So commit always happen at the very end of the transaction.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So now let's go through this one by one again. So what is an apex trigger? An apex trigger is a piece of code that automatically executes before or after specific database events occur on Salesforce record. So whenever any kind of event happened on the Salesforce record, which means an insert happened or update happened or deletion happened or undelete of the records happened, then those triggers will get fired depending upon what triggers you have. Okay. Triggers will run automatically when data changes in Salesforce. So these triggers will run automatically. You don't have to explicitly call these triggers. Now, why do we need triggers? Okay. Salesforce has validation rules. Salesforce has flows. It has these workflow rules that it used to have. Now, triggers are required. There are multiple cases where triggers are needed. First of all, when the operations get too complex or you're dealing with a large sets of records, you want to make a SOAP call out. You cannot do that through the flows. You want to have a better exception handling. You cannot get that a proper try catch using flows. So there are several reasons where you are going to use triggers versus a flow. Multiple records are involved, performance and bulk handling needs to happen. So there would be scenarios where the flows might not work, but flows have been getting very, very powerful. So things that were not capable of using, were not done through the triggers, were not earlier been done through the flows, now can be done with the flows as well, because there are different, several types of flows have been improved. But also, one of the issues that I, as a developer, feel with the flows is it's hard sometimes to go over that whole flow when it becomes too big. Whereas triggers, you can easily you can easily debug it. So when the flow gets too big, it's hard to debug it. But also, if there are certain use cases which you cannot do through flows, you have to use triggers in those cases. Okay. So when you have, let's say, want to auto create related records, or you wanted to enforce some complex business rules, in those cases, you are going to use triggers. But a lot of companies, they are very code heavy, even though they should be following flows, they end up writing triggers because that's how they know about it. So you will find a lot of examples where a flow would have been an option, but companies are using triggers to do the same thing. Okay. So when there is complex operations, proper error handling, or you want to do what do you call partial update or partial success, in those cases, you will go with the trigger as compared to flows. Okay. Now, triggers can run on 7 events. So there are generally 7 events on which trigger can run. So we have before events and after events. So before event means before the record is being inserted, before the record is being updated, or before the record is being deleted. So those are the triggers are called as before trigger. After triggers are after insert, after update, after delete, after undelete. Okay, so there are 7 events. Now, you will basically, if one particular trigger can be called on all these events. Okay, and then inside of the trigger, you can have, okay, if it is a before trigger, if it is a insert trigger, do this. If it is an after trigger, and if it is an after insert, do this. So you can have one trigger which will get fired on all these events happening. And then you can have different logic to call based upon what kind of event has happened. Okay, so basic syntax, as I mentioned, trigger will have a trigger name. You have to use the keyword on, then you will specify the name of the object, and then a comma separated list of events, and then your code inside of the trigger. Okay, so this is a very simple trigger, account trigger, which is on account object. So this trigger will fire on account object, which means anytime you make a change to the account record, now it says before insert. Before insert means, so you clicked on save, before that record actually gets saved to the database or committed to the database, this piece of code will get executed. Now, if you are trying to, when will you use something like this? So before trigger will be used when you want to pre-populate some data, you want to validate the data that you're populating, is it a valid data or not? So in those scenarios, you will use a before trigger. Okay, just like you have a before flow, you have a before trigger as well. And this before trigger can be used to make sure the values that you're trying to put, is it a valid values? Is the business condition meets? Or you want to update some default values before the record actually gets saved to the database. Okay, any questions up till now, guys?
Yeah, I mean, how many?
But I don't know if it's related. Probably not related to this topic, but is there any way that we delete an Apex code in production?
When you delete an Apex code in production?
Yeah, is there any way to do that?
Okay, so this is what you usually do. Let's say you have to have first delete it from the lower orgs and then update those deleted changes to the next org. As I know how Capado works it. So Capado you will do some destructive changes and you will push it to the next org, those destructive changes, and then those records will get, those things will get deleted. I know how Capado works.
Oh, okay. So if you delete in one org, like in
Yeah.
UAT, we can.
So first, what you'll do is you will basically, whatever you want to delete, you don't delete it in the next org. So let's say you have a dev org and you have a test org, right? You don't directly go and delete it, the Apex classes or fields from this org. What you will do is you will go ahead and do a destructive change. And inside of the destructive change, you will add all the fields. And let's say you want to delete the class. So all of that, you will put it under the destructive change. You will push this destructive change to the test org, which will delete it from the test org. And then you will come back to the developer org and you will manually delete those fields and Apex classes from the developer org.
Okay, thank
Does
you.
it make sense? Do you guys
Yeah.
use Capado?
No,
Okay, so,
we are we still use change set, so
oh,
yes. And Visual Studio Code. So
Yeah,
okay.
I use Capado. It's very good. I mean, you don't have to install Salesforce SLI or even Git is already installed there. You don't have to merge anything. It's already like, everything you write code, pretty much. There's one thing in the Capado, I like it. If there's a like pre-production like thing, it's kind of pipeline. If there you have to delete something, you just move it towards like this pipeline, you change it and push it back again instead of going all through the different org. I don't know what is it called. It's a sort of pipeline. I remember.
Pipeline manager?
Yes. I mean, if you need to fix your code, you don't have to push it towards before to the UAT or SIT. It stays in the Capado. You just fix it and then push it back again. I mean, merge again to the Git.
Okay, what was the other question? I know there was another question that was there.
No, I was just going to ask about the triggers. I was going to be asked about you can have then a before and after trigger then on the same object, because you mentioned earlier you can't
Yes.
have.
Yes.
Okay.
So because as I mentioned, you can only have one trigger per object. You should only have one trigger per object, and that trigger can fire on every event. But the code you will write in such a way that only a selected piece of code will be fired. If it is a before trigger, if it is an after trigger, then this route will happen. So depending upon how you've written trigger, those logic will be executed.
So you can have all the different types of triggers, like you could have on one object trigger new, trigger old, trigger map. Could you have all those? Just, one singular of each one of those types, or just a before and after?
There's only before and after. So
Before and
you
after.
can,
Okay.
yeah, there is no, like you can have, let's say you can have a trigger, account trigger on account, and this particular trigger can get fired on before insert, before update, before delete, and then after insert, after update, after delete. All of this can be written inside of the same trigger.
Oh, okay.
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 So now Salesforce has given you a lot of these built-in variables, okay? And that is the variables you will use to access certain values, okay? So for example, trigger.new, trigger.old, trigger.new map, trigger.old map, and trigger is insert, is update, is delete, is before. Now, what is the difference? So trigger.isInsert basically gives you a Boolean value. It will either give you a true or it will give you a false value, depending upon if the event that fired the trigger, is it an insert event? That means, hey, did you inserted a record? And if you wanted to check inside of the trigger, was it an insert operation? Then in that case, you will use trigger.isInsert. So when you will use, let's say, this is the trigger. Okay, this is the trigger. And the trigger is an account trigger on the account object, and this will get fired on before insert and before update. Now, inside of the trigger, okay, if you want to do certain things, if it is an insert operation, and something else if it is an update operation. So the same code will get executed on both these operations, right? So what you can do is you can say if trigger is insert, how will you know? If trigger is insert trigger, then call something else, call this. Else, you can check if the trigger is update, call something else. So these are the variables you can use to change the execution depending upon what type of trigger is it. Okay, was that trigger got fired because of an update operation, or was it an insert operation? Was it a delete operation? Was it a there is another one. Was it a before trigger? Before trigger means, did that trigger happen before the record got inserted, updated? Was it a before trigger or was it an after trigger? Okay. And if the trigger is currently executing, that means you can use trigger.isExecuting, which tells you that if the trigger is currently running. You probably won't use this. Now, trigger.new will hold new version of the record. Now, what does that mean? For example, you had an account record, okay? Now, account record, name of the account was John's J&J, okay? This is the current version. Now, what you did is you clicked on the edit button and you went ahead and you updated the name to Johnson & Johnson. Okay, you updated to Johnson & Johnson. Now, trigger.new will hold the new version of the record. Okay, new version of the record means this is the new version of the record, which actually has the new value. Okay, trigger.old will hold the old version of the record, which will have the old value, which is J&J. Okay, now if you want to have a map of new values. Map of new values means, let's say you did a data loader operation, let's say. And through that data loader operation, you are inserting records. Inserting about, let's say, 10 records. Now, map is of the ID of the records, trigger.new map, okay, ID of the records, versus the actual new version of the record. Okay, so what are the new values for the new account records that you're trying to insert? Sorry, let's do an update. Data loader, you're updating records. So the map of new map will contains a map of the newer version of the records, and old map will contain the map of older version of the record. Okay. So now, in which scenarios there will be old map and new map? You have to remember this. Okay, so if it is an insert operation, if you're doing an insert operation, the trigger.new is there, right? Because it's a brand new record. So trigger.new will be there, but trigger.old map is not available. So if you're using an insert operation, okay, before you inserted the record, you cannot have trigger.of_old map. Okay. Similarly, if you're doing an update operation, trigger.new will be there in the update, as well as trigger.old map will be there, because it's an update operation, which means that there would be a newer version of the record and an older version of the record. So that's why trigger.new will be there, as well as trigger.old map will be there. But if you're doing a delete operation, then the trigger.new will not be there, right? Because the record has been deleted. So trigger.old map will be there. Similarly, if it is an undelete operation, this is something you have to remember. Trigger.new will be there, but trigger.old map will not be there. So this is a way to remember what will be available in which context. So if it is an insert operation, so only in the case of update, both of them will be available. In the insert operation, you will only see trigger.of_new. In the case of delete operation, you will only have trigger.oldMap, new won't be there. And if it is an undelete operation, you will only have trigger.of_new. Okay, so now let's do some examples to make things a little bit more clear. So let's say we have a scenario where if an opportunity is closed won, users must not change amount or close date. Okay, this is a requirement where it says if the opportunity stage is closed won, and if anybody is trying to change the amount on the opportunity, or if you're trying to change the close date on the opportunity, you should get an error message. Okay, so how we will do that? So you have to remember, first important thing is what kind of trigger will it be? Okay, so here it is saying users should be prevented from changing the record. Means before you actually update the record, let's say the opportunity stage was closed won, and at that time the amount was 100,000. Okay, and close date was 12/16, today's date, let's say. Now you went over and edited the record, and now you want the amount to be 200,000. What will happen? It should be prevented from changing because the status of the opportunity is closed won. Okay, so now what will I do? First, I need to see the records that I'm trying to change. So trigger.new will give me all the records that currently I am updating. So it will give me complete list of the records I am updating. Okay, and then I will see the old version, old value of the amount field, and I will compare the new value of the amount field. Similarly, I will compare the old value of the close date, and then I will check if the new value is also same or unequal. Unequal means you are changing the amount field. If it is also unequal means you're changing the close date. So then what you will do is you will use this add error method and you will throw an error to the UI. Okay, so this is how you will do. So you will have, let's just understand the code. So there is a trigger called opportunity lock trigger, which is on the opportunity. So this is how you will write trigger, name of the trigger on opportunity before update. Means you want to throw an error to the user if they are trying to change an opportunity record. Okay, so it is before trigger, not after trigger, because after means you have already saved, you have updated the record, right? If you want to do anything on related records, then you will use after trigger. Before trigger means on the same record, if you want to prevent something from getting saved, that means it is a before update operation. Then you are checking all the records that you're trying to update. Then here you want to compare the older version with the newer version of the record, right? So here it is using trigger.of_oldMap, and it is, you are passing in the opportunity ID. So you will get the old version of the opportunity. Okay, how do I know what was the previous value of that opportunity amount? And then you are checking, hey, if the stage is closed won and the amount is not equals to the old amount, means you're trying to edit the amount value, or you're trying to update the close date. If these condition meets, then you will throw an error message. Okay, so let's first write down this trigger. So I'll go over to the developer console. And over here, let's do close all, file, new, Apex trigger. Now this is the name of the trigger. It is on the opportunity object. So select the opportunity object right here and then hit submit. And then here you will specify the complete code. So now what's going to happen is, so this is a before update. If you change it to after update, then this trigger is not going to get, then what will happen is after update means that error will not be kicked because you've already saved the record. But if you want to prevent the user from updating the amount or close date of the opportunity, which is in closed one, you have to do before update. Does everybody understands why are we doing before update rather than after update?
So we use
Yeah.
before update because if we don't want to
To
update
save.
happens. We don't want.
Exactly.
Right.
You don't want to update the amount or the closed opportunity. That's why we are saying before update. You want to prevent the user. And then here, trigger.new will give you all the records that you are trying to update. Okay? All the records. So it could be one record. If a user is doing it, then mostly it'll be one record at a time. But if you can have a data loader and any of that, then it'll be through multiple records. So then it is iterating over each one of those records. And then it is fetching the older version of that record. What was the old values on the opportunity before you hit the save? Okay. So then this old opportunity will give you the old version. Here you're checking, is the opportunity old value was closed one? Yes. So that's what you're checking the stage name. Then you're checking, is the new amount on the opportunity, is it equals to or not equals to the old amount? If it is not equals to, that means you are making an update. Okay. If the opportunity close date, was it equal or not equal? Is it not equal? That means you're making a change. And if these condition meets, that is when you want to throw an error message. And the way to do is using this add error method. So now, if
So,
you go,
so
yeah,
Deepika, in this add error, is that a method that throws an
error message
error
on,
message like a validation rule?
yes, like an add error will show it on the UI.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so now here, if you go to the opportunities and if you go to the new and let's say not new because I'm doing a before update. So now if I say new, now in this case, this is a update operation or an insert operation?
Insert.
Very good. Now will my trigger will get fired or no?
No.
Exactly. So my trigger is not going to get fired. Let's say I picked up this opportunity. It is already in closed one. And right now, if I try to update the amount on the opportunity, okay, this is the amount, was the old amount was something else. Now I'm trying to update. I'm going to get a message saying amount and close date cannot be changed after closed one. Okay, so you cannot change it. Now, if you have changed this trigger to after update, will the error kick?
What was the
No.
question?
If you change this trigger from before to after update, will the error kick?
No.
No.
No,
No.
because the record has already been saved. So where do you want to throw the error? Okay. Any questions on this example, guys?
I have a question about using after update. When we use after update,
Okay. After update is, let's say you created a record. Sorry, you updated a record. After that record has been updated, you want to trigger a change on a related record. Okay. Or you want to send a notification to somebody after the record has been saved. If the condition meets, then you will go ahead and do an after update when you are updating related records, not the same record.
okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, because you don't want to recall the same trigger, right? You don't want to, if you do it, so let's say, uh, when you're making changes, just like a flow, when you're making a change on the same record, you do it in the before operation. When you're making changes to the other records or sending data to the external system, that should happen once the record has been saved. Okay, so
Thanks.
those
Yeah.
will be after trigger.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now let's say another example we have is do not allow deletion of an account if it has any open opportunities or any cases which are not closed. Okay, let's say this is our requirement where what we are saying is Don't delete the account if it has opportunities which are open or it has cases which are not closed. And if you try to delete such account which has any of these, then you should get an error message. Now, what should be the event in this case? Before delete, right? So here, first what you will do is you will first, now in the case, you will first do this trigger will get fired on before delete. Okay. Now, in this case, you want to prevent. So which one will you use? Trigger dot of old. Okay. Trigger dot of old will have the records, because if you delete means the records will get deleted. So trigger.old will give you the records before it got deleted. Okay. So it is going to tell you, we are going over those records one by one, and you're checking. First, what you're doing is you are getting all the accounts which you're trying to delete. So you got the IDs of all the accounts. Okay. Then once you got the IDs of all these accounts, you want to do a query to figure out, give me all the cases as well as the opportunities which are not closed, and which the case is also not closed and opportunity is also not closed. So what kind of query will it be? You will do select like this. This should be the query. Like so here what you're doing is select the account ID count, okay, from opportunities where account ID in this and the opportunities is not closed. So it will give you, it will give you a account ID, and it will tell you how many opportunities are there which are not closed related to that account. So you will get a map of ID, you'll get a map of the account ID, okay, and the count of opportunities. Was it 2 opportunities that are there for this account? Was it 3 opportunities or not? For example, let's say we go over to this data export. What happened to my extensions? What happened to my inspector? One second, guys. I don't know what happened. Okay, so now if I go here, okay, so now it came. So now if I want, if you see here, this is the query. The query is, let's say you want to do how many accounts are there, and the okay, so now if you want the select, let me see, we have any select ID, comma, count of. So what was the query here? So query was account ID group by account ID. Now, if you remember here, this is the query we have. Account ID in account IDs. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass a comma separated list. So let's say this account has no opportunities. This account has 1 opportunity. So let's say we give this ID. Okay. Similarly, we'll go to another account here. No opportunities. This one is there, comma separated, and this account ID. So this is the query's output. This now here you see here the query, can anybody explain me what the query is returning?
Um,
Um,
well,
if the
it,
opportunity is closed, it is not returning the value.
Could I-
Aggregate result, right?
Excuse me, guys.
it select an account. It goes to an opportunity and select account ID and count the opportunities that the account ID is started with 001 and the other one, and it's not closed, and then group by account ID.
No, little bit off. See, what it is doing is it is fetching those, it is first of all, it is telling you for these two accounts, how many opportunities are there. So you're first doing select account ID, count of ID means the opportunities who have this account ID. So how many opportunities which are not enclosed? Is closed false means the opportunity is not in closed won status or closed lost. How many opportunities are there? So in this case, the query only returned you this account ID only has one opportunity. But even this account ID also had one opportunity. Why did that not showed up? Anybody tell me why?
Because it's closed.
Very good, because it is closed. Okay. So this is only going to give you those count where this account ID with the count. Now, if I go ahead and create another opportunity, and let's say we make it prospecting opportunity 2, hit save. Now, both of them, close date, save. So now both of them will give you 1 count, because now there is, even though it has two opportunities, but one are open and the other one is closed one. Okay. So what it is doing, it is basically, we want to prevent those account deletion if they have open opportunities or open cases. So first it is checking, give all those accounts which you are trying to delete. So you created a list of those accounts. Okay. Then what you're doing is, based on this list of account IDs, you are doing a checking that, okay, how many opportunities does it exist for these accounts which are not in closed status. So this is the query. Moment you use count and group by, the result is an aggregate result, right? It is not an account records or opportunity records, it's an aggregate result. We saw it when we did the SOQL queries. So here you are creating a map, which is nothing but this map, the map of opportunity account ID versus the count. Okay, so here if you see, this is what it's doing. It is putting the ID of the account with the count of the opportunities. Similarly, we did a group by on the cases as well. Okay, so how many cases are there per account? You created a map of it. And then we are iterating over all those accounts again, which you're trying to delete. And then you're checking, does it have more opportunities which are more than 0? Or it has cases which are more than 0? If it is, then throw an error. Okay, so let's do this example and things will get more clear. So this is on account object. So file, new, Apex trigger. And this is on account, hit submit. And here, this is before you delete it, right? So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. So somebody wants to tell me in a simple layman's term, what are we doing here? So first we are collecting all the accounts which we are trying to delete. Okay. So from the trigger.old, we will get all the accounts which we are trying to delete. Then you are counting the open opportunities per account. Okay, so this is the query we are running based on all these account IDs that we are trying to delete. We are taking a group of account ID with the count of opportunities. So here, this is a map that you're creating. Okay, this is a map of ID with the open opportunities that account has. Then same query, just like you did it for opportunities, we are doing it for case. You're creating a map as well of the open case count by the account ID. And then you're iterating over trigger.old, and you are basically getting a count of opportunities and getting a count of case related to that account. And if it is not 0 and it is greater than 0, or if the case count is not null and it is greater than 0, that means you have open opportunities and open cases. And if it is the case, you are deleting, you are basically okay, explain to me, what are we doing here?
If opportunity count
Yeah.
is not null and we have opportunity as
Yeah.
well as we have case and it's not null, we are going to through a message cannot
Okay.
delete the count.
Yeah, but explain to me what this code is doing. We're doing something. Message is there, but do you see a different, what are we doing in the message?
So we are basically having like a list of errors or reasons, and we are showing them all at once together by joining them.
So give me an example here. How will the error message look like?
So it will basically say cannot delete account because it has uh, these many open opportunities and these many open cases
Very
with
good. So
the
it'll tell you like,
relevant count.
very good. So it'll tell you the count of how many open opportunities. See here, you have a static message, which is just cannot delete account because it has. And then you created a list here, reasons. And what you're doing is, if the opportunity count is not null and opportunity greater than 0, means if this condition meets, if the first condition meets, that means it has valid number of opportunities. So to this reason, we will add the number of opportunities. So let's say it had one opportunity. So it will say one open opportunities. And it will say if the case count is also, if it has both opportunities and cases, then it will tell you how many cases are there. So it'll say 2 opportunities. So what it'll do, message is this. It will say join reasons. So it'll say cannot delete account because it has 3 open opportunities and 2 open cases. Okay, this is, we're joining this string with the help of AND operator, and at the end we have a dot, which is like a period. Okay, so now if I try to delete this account, I should get an error message because the trigger will get fired, and that trigger will tell me I have 1 open opportunities. That's why I cannot delete it. Moment I change the status of this open opportunity from prospecting to closed one, now I don't have that issue. In this case, I will be able to delete it. Okay, your attempt to delete in that close one, they're gonna be, wait a minute. Now in this case, do I have another trigger? Oh, this is a Salesforce error maybe that yeah. Yeah, so because there must be something which it prevents it, but the trigger didn't get fired in this case. This logic is not coming from the trigger. Okay, so if you're trying to delete which has open opportunities, you'll get the error message. Now, in the same way, if it had cases also, it will give you. So let's say we had it created a case here and case origin phone, hit save. So now it has one case. So if you try to delete it, and let's say we change the opportunities prospecting, hit save, and the second one also, we will change it to qualification and hit save here. And then if I try to delete it, you will get an error message saying 2 open opportunities and 1 open case. You cannot delete this account. So the trigger got fired. Any questions, guys?
So generally, is that correct to say we use trigger when we want something to be triggered and want something prevent to happen or something that need to happen. That's the time we use trigger.
Or triggers usually you will use when you want something to happen automatically when a database operation happens. Okay? All these other things, Apex classes or anything, you have to call them explicitly. Trigger is a piece of code. You don't call them explicitly. It automatically will run behind the scene. If you have a flow, right, before triggered flow or after triggered, you don't call it. The moment the record changes, the flow gets called, right?
Right.
So the
Right.
same way a trigger works. Flow is used in a much more medium to simple scenarios, whereas trigger, when the operations gets too complicated, when it revolves large sets of records, when you want to do partial success, when you want to have a better try-catch fault mechanism, in those cases, you will use triggers. Okay?
Thanks.
Now, another one I have is, we do have 5 minutes, we can discuss this one. So it says here, do not allow contact to be inserted if account is inactive or account is blocked. So tell me, how will you do it before I go to this one? And we might do this tomorrow, but tell me what will be your pseudocode in order to do this. You have to prevent the contact to be created with an account if the account is either account is active or it is blocked. So in either case, contact should not be inserted to that account. So what kind of trigger will that be?
Before insert?
Before insert, on which object it would be?
Account.
Think again. Contact or account?
Contact.
You are trying to insert a contact record. So the trigger would be on
Contact.
contact.
Right.
Okay. Now, what will be available in the case of, how will you know which records you are trying to insert?
Trigger.old.
Trigger.new.
Trigger.new. Because see, this is you're doing an insert. The records never existed, so there was no old.
Yes, correct.
So trigger.new. So then what you're gonna do? First, you will check, because a contact can also exist on its own, right? So first you will check, does this a contact has an account ID? Correct? Is that what you're going to check?
Right, yes.
Right? If it has an account ID, let's say we get a list of all those account IDs, then what you're going to do?
And then we have an if condition to check if it's active or it's not.
But once you get the account ID, what are you going to do?
We'll check if that account is active or if it's blocked.
Yeah, but first you have to query, right? You will write a single query first to get so here you're adding those account IDs, and then you have to do the figure out what is the active flag and what is the blocked flag. And then where the ID in this, then you will iterate over, then you will create a map of those, because you want to know for this account ID, this is the account record. For this account ID, this is the account record. Then you will iterate over trigger.new, and then you will get, is the account active or is it account blocked? In either of those cases, you will get an error message. Did everybody understood, or should we do it via the example where let's do it without wasting time? Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. File new. It is a trigger which is on contact account validation on the contact object. So we will figure out the contact object and then hit submit. Okay, so what are we doing here in this trigger? It is first we are so in this trigger, this trigger will fire on both scenarios. If you're trying to add a new contact or if you're trying to update an existing contact. So you could be updating from this account to another account also, right? So even if you're trying to do an update or you're trying to do an insert, in both the cases, this code is going to get executed. So first thing is you are trying to figure out those accounts to which you are trying to add those contacts to. Okay, so basically, if the contact ID is present on that contact, you will add those account IDs, and then you are doing a query on all those basically accounts with those IDs, and you're creating a map of them. Map of ID means account ID with that account information. And then you are going through trigger.new, which is nothing but the contacts that you're trying to either insert or update. And then you're checking if that contact has an account ID on it. If it is, then you will fetch it from this map. And then here you're checking if the account is not active and account is blocked. So in either both the cases, if the account is not active or it is the block, then you will get an error message. Did you guys understood it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So tomorrow, guys,
Deepika, why we are creating map here?
because how will you know which, because see here, if you don't create the map, what is the other way you will do? If you don't create the map, you got account records. There is
Yeah,
no indexing. You will create a list of, let's say you're creating a list of account records.
yeah.
So from the list of account records, how will you get the account record based on the ID? You can only do based on index, right? You can only do get me the 0th index or once. You can't get it based on the ID of the record. If let's say I say, give me, you have a list of account records, right? And it has 01112 name is this, and it has X111 name is YZ, whatever. I tell you, this is a list of account records. How will you fetch this account from this list? Out of this list, how will you fetch?
So we cannot use the index.
How will, if
We need a map.
let's say you have 990,000 records or 50,000, how will you use index? How do you know which record is at which index?
We need a map.
You need a map.
Okay.
Because see, if you create a list also, if the list of accounts, in that case, you have no way of figuring out, give me that account record. Then you have to do a query again. Okay, give me the account record where this inside of the for loop, which is not an ideal situation. We should never do that. So map is the better way of dealing with data.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Got it.
So now this is it. We will continue tomorrow as well on triggers. We will talk about some of the recursion, how to prevent recursion. We will talk a little bit about what happens when a flow and trigger both are involved, which gets executed first. So we'll discuss all of that tomorrow.
Great. And could we also touch a little bit on the trigger framework and how can we use that?
Okay.
Use them too.
Trigger framework, usually every company have a different way of writing the trigger framework, but I'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Okay. Okay, guys, I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks. Bye.
Deepika, can we get this document?
Oh, sure.
This
I
triggers.
think. 1 second. Let me do it right now before I forget. Okay, guys, I uploaded it. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.